All right, so now that we've got our application pretty much set up to handle authentication logic, right? We've got these routes that automatically redirect users, we've got a login page, a home page, etc. Let's actually see now how to add Firebase Auth to our application so that we can allow users to, log in with their email and password. So the first thing that we're going to do here is install the Firebase package into our front end. So we'll say npm install Firebase. Okay, and we just install the entire Firebase package like that. Firebase Auth is just a subset of that we end up using. You'll see what that looks like in just a minute here. But while that's installing, let's actually head over to the Firebase console, because what we need to do in order for Firebase to really work in our React app is we need to set up a Firebase project that will basically take care of managing all of our users, storing all their emails, passwords, etc. So what you're going to want to do is go to firebase.google.com, and you're probably going to have to log into this if you don't already have a Gmail account. And what you're going to do is essentially just click on Go to Console here up in the right-hand corner, and that'll take you to what's called the Firebase console. Basically, this is your control panel for all of your Firebase projects. So what we're going to do here is create a new project, and you see I already have this Firebase Auth Basics one here. That's just the one that I was using for testing earlier, so ignore that one. What we're going to do is click on Add Project, and then we're just going to have to give Firebase a few details about our project. So the first thing is going to be the project name. Now this one can be really anything we want it to be. It's just an internal identifier, so no users are going to see it. So what I'm going to do is say React Firebase Auth Basics. I don't think that's what I called my other one. And what you'll see is that as you type that, you have this little thing down here that appears as well. Now this is the project ID, and this is something that you cannot change and that the user may see. So you're going to want to be careful about what you end up having here, right? Don't go putting in any inside jokes or anything that you don't want users to see. Generally, Firebase will just generate something automatically for you. It does have to be unique across all of Firebase, so you may well find that your favorite string there is already taken. Now that we've done that, we've put in the project name. I'm going to leave the project ID the way it is, and we're going to click on Continue. Next thing, it's going to ask us if we want to have Google Analytics enabled for our Firebase project. I'm going to turn that off since that's just added complexity that we don't really need right now. And I'm going to click on Create Project now. Okay, so this little spinner thing is going to run for a little while. And once it finishes, we're basically going to have to add what's called an application to our project. So let's click on Continue. And sure enough, right under where it says Get Started by Adding Firebase to Your App, you're going to want to click on this web icon here. Now, first of all, just as a side note with Firebase, Firebase does let you add iOS apps, Android apps, and even games that you create with Unity. And it allows you to basically use Firebase's services for those things. But for now, right, since we're developing a web application, we're going to use this web app. And applications in Firebase, by the way, are just another word for platforms, right? So you could have, as we saw, an iOS application, an Android application, a web application, etc. So we just need to let Firebase know that those exist here by basically creating one of those for our React app. So for our app nickname, we're going to say something like React Frontend. We're going to leave this Firebase hosting thing unchecked. That is another service that Firebase provides for us if you're interested in that. Basically, it will host your app for you, but we're going to leave that for now. And we're going to click on Register App. That will spin for a second or two, and then it will spit out some code here. So we already ran npm install Firebase in our front end. So the next thing that we have to do is copy all of this code that they gave us here. I'll describe what it is exactly in just a minute, but let's just copy that right now. And we're going to head back over to our React app and open up the React entry point, right? So that's this index.js file here. So what we're going to do is paste this code now into index.js before where we say react dom.render. Okay, and then we're just going to delete these comments. We don't need those. And we also don't need app. We can just say initialize app Firebase config. Okay, so what is going on here? Essentially, what this Firebase config thing is, it just contains some unique identifier strings that will basically tell our React project what URLs to contact and what IDs to use in order to actually allow our users to log in, right? In order to do database stuff if you end up going with Firestore, etc. So these things here also, they're not sensitive information, right? These are public information that gets sent to the client anyway, so don't worry. It's perfectly fine to commit these to GitHub. So don't worry, just because it's a big, long, random-looking string, it's not actually a secret key. Anyway, that's how Firebase is set up. Essentially what this does, again, it tells our application all of the unique identifiers and URLs for our Firebase project that we created, right? This project and app that we created over here in the console. And, it just helps it link up correctly to those. So now that we've initialized our Firebase app, essentially what we'll be able to do is in the rest of our application, in our components, etc., we'll be able to actually make calls to Firebase Auth, and that will allow us to create users, to let users log in, etc. Okay, so let's first just go back, though, to our Firebase console. We're going to click Continue to Console, and that should be about all we need to do. All right, so the next thing that we're going to have to do is inside our login page, we're going to have to add a little bit of logic that will allow a user to actually log in. Now, where this is going to happen is inside this login function here. We're going to remove our alert, and instead of doing that, we're actually going to make a call to Firebase, right, to Firebase Auth, telling Firebase Auth to log in the user with the corresponding email and password. So first of all, what we're going to need to do is import a few things from Firebase. So we'll need to say import get auth and sign in with email and password. That is, as you may have guessed, the function that we'll call to actually log in the user. And those are both imported from the Firebase package and specifically /auth, right? So that's a sub package of Firebase. Okay, so now inside this login, what we're going to do, it's going to need to be an asynchronous function, first of all. And what we're going to do is just say const auth equals get auth. This basically just gets a reference to Firebase Auth. And then what we're going to do is say await sign in with email and password. We're going to pass the auth object to this as an argument. So auth. And then the second and third arguments are the email and password that we've collected from the user here in our login page. So we're going to say email and password, and that will take care of logging our user in. All right. So just to show us that that's actually happened successfully, we're going to say alert, and we'll say successfully logged in. And that should be about it. So before the user can actually log in, however, we're going to need to actually create a user in Firebase Auth so that we'll have a matching account with the email and password that we're going to use, right? You'll notice that we haven't yet created a create account page over here in our pages folder. That's something we'll get to later, so don't worry about it. But for now, what we can do, we're going to go into authentication in our Firebase console. We're going to click on this Get Started button here, which should activate Firebase Auth for our project. And then down here in this box, right, you can see that these are what are called sign-in providers. Basically, these are just different ways that you can allow users of your application to sign in. So you can see that in addition to email and password, which is what we're going to be using here, there's also Google, Facebook, Play Games, Game Center, Apple, GitHub, Microsoft, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of different providers that you can use to allow users to log into your application. And that's something that we'll see later on as well. But for now, let's just select email and password. We're going to flip this little switch next to email and password up at the top that says enable. We're going to click on save. And that's all we should need to do. So now that we've activated this email password provider, what we're going to do is click on the Users tab up in the top left. We're going to click on Add User. And here's where we're going to add the first user to our application that we're going to actually be able to log in with. So for the email, I'm just going to say sean@gmail.com. And for the password, I'm going to say ABC123! We can click on Add User now, and that will create a new user in our application. Now, note also that this is not something that you'll generally do, right? Creating accounts for users, unless you're working in a very exclusive application where users have to actually contact you before you can create an account for them, you're probably not going to be doing this. The only reason we're doing this here again is just because we don't yet have a create account page. So now that we have this account, let's see how we can log in with it. What we should be able to do is just go to our login page. Here, what we're going to need to do first is actually change isAuth to false. Okay. Oops, we need to run our application again. Okay, we'll say npm run start. And there we go. We can see it goes immediately to our login page. So let's enter in the email that we created the account for. Mine is sean@gmail.com. And then for the password, ABC123! And now let's click logged in. And we should see successfully logged in, logged out through this alert. So when we click OK, we are at this point going to be logged in. However, because we're just using a hard-coded variable inside our app component, we're not going to see any changes reflected. And that's something that we'll take a look at shortly. Right? We're going to need to actually have Firebase listen for changes in the user's auth state. But anyway, those are the basics of logging in with Firebase Auth. As you can see, it's super easy. It's literally just one function call that takes care of most of that for you. I hope this has been informative, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.